Hello, Kaustubh. Good morning. Great to
Hello.
have you on the show at 100x Live on your book launch. It's logical, innovating, profitable business model. It has been my pleasure working with Dr. Kaustubh Dhargalkar. Kaustubh, if you can just move little to the left, the frame will be full. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank
Hello,
you.
Kaustubh. Good morning.
Hello. Good
Great
morning.
to have you on the show at
Good
100x Live on your book launch. It's logical, innovating, profitable business model. It has been my pleasure working with Dr. Kaustubh Dhargalkar. Kaustubh, if you can just move little to the left, the frame will be full. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank
Hello,
you.
Kaustubh. Good morning.
Hello. Good
Great
morning.
to have you on the show at 100x
Good
Live
morning.
on your book launch. It's logical. Pleasure working with Dr. I think, Kaustubh, your voice is echoing at your end. Whenever I add to the screen,
Replaying.
can you just
The audio is replaying.
relog in?
I don't know. Audio is
Hey, Kaustubh, can you hear me now?
yes. I can hear you.
Okay, I think we are back on track. Sorry, audience, for this technical glitch which happened across. So, welcome, Dr. Kaustubh. And this book, what we are going to talk about, proposes a framework with design thinking as the backbone for creating a win win situation to visualize.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I think we are back on track.
Vatsal,
Can you move out of this? I think this voice gets echoed, Vatsal. Hey, Vatsal. Vatsal, this voice gets echoed. We are not able to hear. Can you just log out? I think. Yeah. Oh, hopefully this doesn't get troubled more, Kausu. Uh, you are an acclaimed professor of innovation design thinking at V School, currently mentor at CII Ahmedabad and faculty at IIT Bombay. In the current time, with this book, what's the relevance in today's context and for whom? Right, this book, it's an apt time, and with all the design business model and a lot of the entrepreneurs. Professor of innovation design thinking at V School, currently mentor
I
at
think the
CII Ahmedabad and
voice,
faculty
your
at
earlier
IIT Bombay.
earlier statements are
In
getting
the
re-echoed.
current time,
Yes,
with
yes.
books, what's
So
the
sorry.
relevance? Let me just relog in, Kaustubh. Let me just relog
I'll
in.
leave and re-log in. Okay.
And with all or my recommendation is, yeah. Sorry, folks. While we are live, this challenge is there is a technical glitch which has happened across. Apologies for the same.
Yeah.
So Kaustubh, yeah,
Yeah.
you can go live now. You are on. Show is yours. I'll just go on the backstage. Just tell us about this book and the current relevance.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you for having me on this show. Thank you, 100x.vc, for having me on the show. The book is.
So Kaustubh, you can go live now. You are on. Show is yours. I'll just go on the backstage. Just tell us about this book and the current relevance.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you for having me on this show. Thank you, 100x.vc, for having me on the show.
So Kaustubh, you can go live now. You are on. Show is yours. I'll just go on the backstage.
Hello, can you hear me? Can people see me? I think plays a recording.
Yes, Kaustubh, we can hear you. Just go live.
Okay, I will. Yeah, the book basically is about yeah, innovating on the business model. Normally, when we talk about innovation, can you hear me? Can people see the voice is a recording.
Yes, Kaustubh, we can hear you. Just go live.
Okay, it's replaying. It's replaying. Is about yeah, innovating on the business model. Normally, when we talk about innovation, you hear me on the voice is a recording. The recording is playing again and again. Okay. Replaying is about Hello. Am I audible and visible now? Hello. Am I audible now?
Yes, Kaustubh, you are audible and visible. Please go live.
Yeah. Good morning. I think the earphones possibly might do the trick. Let us hope so. Am I audible and visible? Well, it's re-recording the whole thing. Uh, Replaying the earlier recording again. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, Kaustubh, you are audible and visible. Please go live.
Yeah. I am live, but there seems to be some earphones possibly might do the trick. Let us hope so. Am I audible and visible? Well, it's re-recording the whole thing. Uh, replaying the earlier recording again. Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, Kaustubh, you are audible and visible. Please go live.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I am live, but there seems to be some earphone might be a lot of am I audible and visible? Well, the recording.
Is it, I'm
Yes,
on through the
Kaustubh.
phone. Is it better?
Yes, yes. Let's try this. Yeah.
Is it better now?
Yes, go ahead, Kaustubh. Go ahead, Kaustubh. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. All right. Good morning. Let's directly jump into the questions that Sanjay had already asked. The book is about looking at business from a perspective of reimagining the business models that one is currently pursuing. It is about trying to put a framework in terms of how to relook at one's business model. Normally, the approach of innovators is to innovate on product and technology. Through the book, I've tried to kind of bring out with examples the fact that two companies in the same domain, same product, same service, how one company goes ahead or by relooking at its business model and beats competition. So that's one aspect of the whole thing. The other aspect is about understanding users very deeply. So it's a kind of a philosophy based on design thinking as the backbone, how it can help develop the empathy quotient of an organization, how that high empathy quotient can help organizations to really relook at the way businesses are being done. And currently, the kind of situations that all of us are going through, businesses are going through, I feel one really needs to reimagine the way they are going to be doing business henceforth. So, broadly, this is what the book talks about.
So, Kaustubh, you have been an entrepreneur yourself. What kind of experiences you bring from that side of it? You become a professor. You understand the startup world so well. So, what kind of experiences which you brought in, and what are your thoughts about this post-COVID world? What's going to change for entrepreneurs, and how does one apply design thinking in their business?
Uh, I mean, I have been an entrepreneur myself in the space of manufacturing for about 16 years. And then I've gotten into teaching and research and consulting. So I continue to be a freelancer, entrepreneur, whatever you call it. And that with the interactions with various people, a lot of things have been absorbed. my thinking process has got evolved over a long time. And the way things are right now, post COVID, coming to your question of post COVID, uh, we are experiencing the stress on the supply side with broken supply chains. A lot of vendors, processors have kind of become idle. They have capacity, but they don't have work or jobs to be performed. That's the side that's the strain on the supply side. And on the demand side, we have consumers who might be facing job cuts, who might be facing salary cuts, pay cuts, etc. So we have a cash-strapped customer or a consumer on the consumer side. So how do we really how does business now capture the imagination or the needs of the cash-strapped consumer? That's where I feel that we really need to look at, as businesses, we really need to look at synergies which can be generated in the broken supply chains, not only in your domain supply chains, but across your domains as well. So things like vertical integration and forward integration, etc., have been spoken in the past. But I'm saying that beyond your own domain, how can you start looking at synergies within the frame or the scope of the situation right now? Say, like for example, if one is say an appliance manufacturer based out of some developed country which supplies CKD kits to an emerging economy where assembly happens and distribution happens. Now, by virtue of the consumer being cash strapped, a lot of operations and supply chains being broken, operations in the emerging economy are going to be disturbed, some are going to be broken, etc. So how do we like now recreate that whole situation wherein we are able to provide the same quality appliances, but maybe at a reduced cost, maybe as a pay as you use kind of a service, uh, maybe as pay as you gain, maybe unbundling of the services needs to be looked at to cater to the cash strapped consumer. And on the supply side, how do you now cut costs? So how do we convert our fixed costs into variable costs? How do we look at tying up with certain suppliers who have lost their operations because of this pandemic? How do we utilize their idle capacity in being able to cut costs on the supply side? That's what I see emerging in this post-COVID world. And the significance of some principles of design thinking that I speak about in the book is that we should be able to relook at the user journeys of our customers from a new perspective, because once the lockdown opens up, people are not going to start behaving the way they were till February, so to say, or January in some parts of the world. In India, maybe mid-March. So what are the renewed user journeys of these consumers, and how do you understand those user journeys through certain techniques, tools that design thinking uses to observe, interact with users, analytics, etc., and then relook at these user journeys and identify new touch points through which you can access those same customers, consumers. That's what businesses really need to look at in the upcoming post-COVID times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is great. Thank you for that insights in terms of working. Uh, what is that one message you believe this book has given across, right? And what are you trying to send out that one message with this book? The readers, what should they expect whenever they buy this book? What is going to improve for them?
Uh, if you want to, one message that I would like to communicate is that innovation is not a one-off aha moment. It can be a cultivated skill. So I've tried to break that myth that innovation and creativity are the purview of only the genius. Anybody with a sensible head on one shoulder and a deeply user centric attitude to problem solving can become innovative. And the book in the book I have tried to propound or propose a kind of a broad framework, if followed, will make the probability of innovation happening higher. So rather than just being random attempts at creativity and breakthrough ideas, can innovation be cultivated as a mindset? Can it be an acquired skill? And I strongly believe that it can be an acquired skill. And that's what I have tried to throughout the book. So that would be one strong message that I would like to pass through the book, which can be useful for entrepreneurs as well as corporate
So we
executives
have a
as
positive
well.
news that we can cultivate a skill. Nobody's born genius. Everybody can learn across and cultivate skills. That's awesome, Kaustubh. I mean that would be quite positive welcome to most of the entrepreneurs, right? Wha- if you have to put in, how is the narrative of the book, right? What do you how you are communicating, how should one go about going through the chapters, so what's the narrative here?
Uh, the narrative I have created it in terms of not a theoretical overload, but there are lots of stories and examples from my personal entrepreneurial experience as well as my consulting experience with a large number of companies across the spectrum, from automobiles, Daimler, Mercedes-Benz, Mahindra, etc., to retail like Big Bazaar, Future Group, banking, Citibank, etc. What I've tried to bring in is the story first and then the takeaway, the concept later, the story first, what actually happened, why did it happen, and what was the basic underlying principle that one can understand from these stories, which made these companies or these projects successful, and then build a theory around it. So that's been my approach. So the whole book is divided into 16 chapters. Each chapter has multiple stories to make 3 to 4 points. Next chapter, 2 3 stories, another 2 3 points, etc. And at the end I have tried to kind of put the whole jigsaw together with a templatized process of making innovation happen, of trying to explore new business models and making them successful. So at the end of the book, I have put a framework, a simple framework which can be applied in day-to-day operations while thinking strategically also. So that's been the narrative, stories and concepts weaved in together.
Also, if you can help, while you gave us the broad narrative in terms of how and what to expect across with the book, can you tell the viewers and the audience, an anecdote from the book, the story which you like the most? I'm sure you like all of them, but one which takes away the cake within the book, and if you can just share some insights on that anecdote.
Yeah. As I mentioned some time back, anybody with a sensible head on one's shoulders and a deeply human-centric attitude to problem solving can come up with problems. So, with to make that point, I will the most striking story that comes to my mind is this one. This is about 2.5 years back, about 26, 27 months back. One telecalling BPO approached me with the brief that we want to enhance the efficiency of our operations, and we want to kind of cut down on time, effort, money, etc. That we put into operations. So my first question was, which is the most most time consuming process that, or most inefficient process in your organization? So the obvious answer was the calling process, the telecalling process, because these people just keep on calling us, this, you want this loan, you want that loan, and even if we say no, they keep on pestering us. So it's a very inefficient process. So we began this whole problem solving exercise with a session. Initially, they were saying that we will include only the senior management in these sessions. But I insisted that if we are to solve a problem, we need to take into account the entire project team be involved in this whole thing. Finally, they agreed, and the entire project team, right from senior management, the VPs to the GMs, to the solution architects, to the techies, to the we insisted that I must have 2 telecalling executives also who actually pick up the receiver and talk to the customer, involved in this whole process. So the team of 19 people was formed, and we began this discussion. In the beginning, only I observed that only the senior management was talking. So I was trying to understand what the issues are, etc. And for the first couple of hours or so, the juniors had not opened up at all. So in the first coffee break, I just went and sat with these 2 telecallers and asked them, generally trying to get to know what is happening, etc. I spoke to them, and these guys opened up after a bit and then said a very interesting thing, that when I pick up the receiver and talk to a consumer, talk to a prospect, in the first 5 to 6 sentences from the voice tone of the consumer, I kind of get a feeling whether this prospect will get converted or not get converted. Now, this was a very subjective kind of judgment from these guys, but it intrigued me, and it threw up my antenna also, and it interested me a lot. So when we restarted the workshop after that coffee break, I brought up this topic and made that person, that the telecaller, speak about his insight about this particular thing. And immediately all the senior folks jumped on us saying that, oh, we have 3,500 telecallers making about 40 to 50 calls per 8-hour shift. So we have a volume of about 175,000 to 200,000 calls coming in every day. And if we were to take in the subjective judgment of each of the calls, it would be impossible for us to operate at scale. Now, this was something which was logical, because that volume of operations cannot be judged on the basis of a subjective judgment. But we kept on discussing, and after about 10 to 15 minutes, one of the techies said that, what is voice tone? What is voice tone? It is a sound wave. Sound wave has 3 specific measurable parameters. One is the amplitude, other is the wavelength, and the third is the frequency. And these 3 are perfectly measurable. Then the question was, can we create a data set to measure these? So then my next question was, do you have recorded call logs? Remember, they ask us every time that this call will be recorded for training and quality purposes. With that kind of thought, I asked them, how many recorded calls do you have? They said over the previous 8 odd years, they had about 45 lakh calls recorded in the whole in their database. And then my next question was, is there some documentation of these 45 lakh calls? They said, yes, we have documented them in terms of this got converted after so many tries, this got converted after so many calls, etc. Then it was just a question of pattern recognition between the two. So, but this company did not have internal technology to create a speech recognition engine to be able to to check the voice tone of those 45 lakh calls. So we looked around in the ecosystem and we found a startup which was doing some cool stuff in some speech recognition technology. And all of them got together, and in about 8 to 9 months, they created a voice recognition engine which correlated the documented outcomes of these calls and kind of bucketed the voice tones of these 45 lakh calls into 5 different patterns. That is, voice tone pattern A corresponds to an outright conversion of the prospect. Voice tone pattern B, maybe yes. Voice tone pattern C, a fringe between yes and no. Voice tone pattern D, maybe no. And voice tone pattern E is an outright no. Now, this is a self-learning algorithm which got created. And today, about 3 months back, I had checked with them. They have reached a level where when a telecaller makes a call now, they, within the first 12 words that the telecaller, that the prospect utters, that prospect's voice is fed in the backend voice engine, and that prospect is put into one of these 5 buckets. And depending on which voice tone pattern the prospect falls in, the next set of conversation questions appear in front of the telecaller screen, and the conversation follows smoothly, reducing time, effort, money spent in the whole process. Now, in this, the idea did not come from the top. The idea came from the concept, the germ of the idea came from that telecaller who was in contact with the end user. So that's what I really mean by user first, technology later. And that's the approach that I kind of propound throughout the book, that keep the user at the center at all times, and then look at what technologies can be adapted to kind of solve those problems. Many a time we adopt a technology first, user later approach by saying that I have XYZ technology under my command, and let me use that technology to solve a problem. Yes, but at that time we try to push the technology into the user's throat. I am trying to make it the other way, user first, technology later. Yeah.
Sanjay, you're muted.
From a perspective, how many anecdotes like this are there in the book, right? And any anecdotes which are startup oriented or focused on startups.
Oh yeah, yeah. There are totally, if I look at, I can't tell you the number, but there will be at least about 40 to 45 such anecdotes.
Oh,
This
awesome.
one was from a corporate space, yes, but can you hear me? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we are you're loud
Yeah.
and clear.
So from the startup space, this is about 6 years back. One group of students started off by exploring the needs of deaf and mute housewives, not deaf and mute working women, but deaf and mute housewives. So these guys initially were hitting a nail in terms of they were not able to interact with these women because communication was a problem. So then we just did the next most simple thing, that is going and spending some time with these women in the time that they're really busy and they do not have help around. At such times, we spent some 2-3 hours in each of these houses and figured out very specific, specific requirements, like when the doorbell rings, this lady can't hear and can't respond. When the microwave timer goes off, she can't hear and respond. When the pressure cooker whistle goes off, she can't hear and respond. So these kids created a very simple Bluetooth enabled wristband which could communicate with each of the appliances in the house and which would vibrate whenever that appliance got activated. Now, initially, they looked at trying to sell the wristband, but soon they realized that manufacturing in India needs about 18, 19 licenses. And the product technology is not so great that it can be copied very easily. So then they pivoted it into from B2C to a B2B model, whereby they went to appliance manufacturers and said that um, uh, if you want to call your product as a deaf and mute friendly product, use our cloud platform to help communicate between a wristband, which the deaf and mute person wears, and your device. So they moved from being a manufacturing company to a completely cloud software based company. This was an interesting case of a classical pivot in the business model and reaching out to a much wider customer base. So that's one interesting startup story that I have there in detail in that book.
Yeah. So, Kaustubh, you have a section titled "Innovation Beyond the Esoteric." What do you mean by that? What do you mean by innovation beyond esoteric?
I couldn't hear you. Your voice is cracking.
So, Kaustubh, you mentioned across you have this chapter titled "Innovation Beyond Esoteric." What do you mean by that? Innovation beyond esoteric.
Yeah. Innovation beyond esoteric means, sometime back I said that normally the myth is that you need to be a genius to be able to innovate and be creative. But that's what I mean by esoteric. But I feel very strongly that if you have a mindset that is highly user centered, uh, and a sensible head to kind of decode what is happening in front of you through your observations and interactions with end users, anybody can become an innovator. That's what I mean by going beyond the esoteric. So there's a lot of jargon being thrown around. I have tried to kind of keep the approach to innovation very simple, and in the process, some templates or so which I have kind of created over the last 10, 15 years of my teaching and consulting experience and my entrepreneurial experience into manufacturing prior to that. I've tried to make that process of innovation pretty simple and practically applicable. That's what I mean by going beyond the esoteric.
Awesome, Kaustubh. Thanks for that insight and making us feel important that we also can bring in innovation in terms of. So, what is your you mentioned about creating a win-win situation in the ecosystem. In startup ecosystem, we always say that every deal has to be a win-win. Anything which is win-lose is a lose-lose
Yeah.
kind of stuff in startup world. Now, what's your view on this win-win side
Yeah.
of it? How can you create this kind of model, and can you elaborate that?
Yeah, I mean, that's something which is very important. According to me, our education many a times reinforces a win-lose mindset because we've been brought up on something like multiple choice questions where only one answer is right. But in life, life is not a binary phenomenon. Life, there is a spectrum of gray between 0 and 1. Now, uh, that's where that's what we have not been programmed to think from our education system. And when you think of creating win-win situations, that's the time when your business model remains sustainable for a much longer period of time, because obviously there are more mouths promoting you, there are more people looking at your interest also as well as their interest. So I've spoken about a concept called enlightened self-interest. Your self-interest is there, of course, but it is enlightened enough to see that some other people also benefit from the whole thing. So when one can create that kind of a, circle around your business, then it's an ever expanding helix, because it's a self-feeding mechanism for everybody involved in that ecosystem. So, and how to create those kinds of things are some of the some techniques I have mentioned in that book. Like, how do you identify non-value adding assets in your ecosystem and help those who own those non-value adding assets, help them make money, monetize those assets, and in the process you also make money. How can you actually aggregate demand onto one platform and help your competitors also make money, and every time your competitor makes money, you also make money. So there are some techniques or some traits of these kinds of business models which I have discussed with concrete examples and stories from the immediate recent past, have been discussed to build that kind of a mindset, that win-win kind of a mindset.
Hey, Kaustubh, that was a quite an interesting stuff. Can you help viewers understand, you know, what kind of cheat sheet can be done across? Everybody wants quick solutions. Now, this what you mentioned across has got some inputs. Are there any quick solution, quick fixes? Where we can apply across any learnings and the strategies?
We get what feature to include and what feature to not include in a product or service that we create. Many a time, startups, companies do not have much time for user research. All of that is fine. But so in such situations, what do you do? Where do you start from? So I've created a framework over the last, say, 10 years of my experiences across various projects with companies, various companies, in terms of new product development, new business model creation, etc. And from that experience, kind of a framework has emerged, which has about 73 different attributes, which one can look at while trying to get into a NPD, that's a new product development process. How some of these attributes may be absolute must-haves, some some could be may have kind of, but kind of proves a good starting point for a startup as well as a corporate start the process of solving a problem, the process of trying to create a product or a service. Now, this framework also can be used not just for new product development, but also can be used for benchmarking your existing product or service against what is there in the market. Also can be used for upgrading your existing product or services. So this framework, I call it as a cheat sheet, where when you don't have too much time for doing extensive user research, etc., how can you create quick, low resolution prototypes by including these features into your products and services, trying it out, getting a feedback, improving, eliminating some features or building onto some features, etc. So that framework of those 73 attributes would be useful for folks in that space, new product development or benchmarking or upgradation of existing products or services.
So, Kaustubh, what next? This book is surely going to be a bestseller. You will be coming out with more books. How is this book going to change things for you? Let me ask a personal question. What next for Kaustubh Dhargalkar?
Well, interesting question. I have kind of now got addicted to penning down my thoughts also. So that's what the book has done to me. It took me a long time to put pen on paper or fingers on the keypad to get it done. The original thought came about 7 years back, and I started documenting it 3 years back. So that that has given me a confidence that yes, what I speak maybe makes sense. So there are people who will be willing to listen to it. So keeping my fingers crossed about how the book does, but definitely another one is also in the pipeline, where I'm looking at companies across the spectrum, domestic as well as international, which was a topic of my thesis for PhD. How design thinking helps in corporate innovation with concrete connections to ROI, return on capital employed, number of patents acquired, etc. And what are the kinds of policies that uh, they have kind of they have employed to make this possible. So that's something in the pipeline now. With I don't know how much time it will take.
Sure. We have one questions coming across saying that we're from Tanul Mohod. If an entrepreneur has a user-centric idea, she should get it validated by market before approaching. It can be done across in variety ways, cheaply using KD search method. Any views here on this? Is this a cheap innovation? What you are trying to help get across or save cost?
I can't. I couldn't hear you. Your voice is cracking. So and there is some lag in the system. Can you hear me properly?
You can read the comment over here. I just wanted to ask a question on this comment. Is this book about cheap innovation? Kaustubh?
Okay. Yeah, I could read the comment. So, yes, there are methods of quick value, which I have kind of listed out in the book. How do you kind of create a strong, small and strong user base to begin with, who can be great ambassadors for your product? So there are some very simple methods that I've mentioned there. How can you quickly prototype what you are trying to do before you approach investors or before you approach the market, etc. So those quick, low resolution kind of prototyping techniques I've kind of mentioned in that book, which should help entrepreneurs in that phase. Will be helpful for those people.
So we have another question which is there. Is this book available in paperback version or only e-version?
Now only the e-version is available on Amazon. Paperback will be out in the post the lockdown, because last 2 months the publishers, Sage publishers, printing presses, etc., also were stuck. But they have been able to manage the printing as well. It will be available soon post the lockdown.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kaustubh, coming on 100x Live. Audience, we had some technical glitches, but I'm sure you read the book and you will get all the essence what is required across on design thinking, innovation, and building new business model. I've been a big fan of Dr. Kaustubh Dhargalkar. He has been an awesome teacher to so many of us, and lot of learnings from his book. Any closing comments, Kaustubh, and we'll end the show.
Well, first of all, thanks a lot, 100XVC and Sanjay, for here and giving the opportunity to talk about the book. In short, I will just repeat my message that do not think that innovation and creativity lie in the purview of the genius. All of us can train ourselves to become super innovators. Keep believing in yourself, and most importantly, develop a strong empathy towards your user. Rest of the things will fall in place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, audience, for a patience listening. The book is available on Amazon, and it's logical. Let's read it, buy it, and read it. Thank you. Thanks,